Ukraine struck Moscow with only 2 jets broad, inflicting over $600 million in damage in 16 minutes.
And it began before sunrise, with flames blooming over a capital that believed nothing could reach it. November 1st, 2025, 4:31 a.m. While northern Ukraine staggered under a sudden winter barrage, 40 cruise missiles, 20 attack drones, 3 million civilians thrust into darkness, another storm rose in silence. Not a fleet, not a wave. 2 engines, 2 pilots, 1 plan shaped in secrecy, and then impact. A precision strike lanced across Moscow's western skyline. Glass towers erupted into fire columns 950 degrees hot. Pressure waves rippled down Kutuzovsky Prospect, and nearly 3,000 windows shattered in a single breath. Backup substations buckled. A switchyard feeding nearly 2 million residents blinked into blackout. But explosions were only the beginning. An entire command grid faltered. Cameras failed. Secure lines glitched. A fortress built on steel and surveillance suddenly learned what it meant to feel vulnerable. This was not overwhelming force. It was targeted intelligence rewriting the cost of modern power. Before we enter the night in full, tell me, do you believe 2 aircraft can break a billion-dollar shield? 4:31 a.m., November 1st, 2025. The night smelled of diesel and old snow, and then the sky broke open. 40 caliber missiles and 20 Lancet loitering drones screamed out of the north. A winter barrage valued at roughly $170 million aimed at Kharkiv, Chernihiv, and Konotop. 3,100,000 civilians woke to alarms and red blips on cold screens. Air bases scrambled. Radars painted the heavens in frantic sweeps. Interceptors rose like pale ghosts. Patriot and Iris batteries spat fire across the dark. 34 intercepts claimed, but 5 missiles still found flesh of the city. Apartment blocks shuttered. A manufacturing hangar for composite airframes took a direct hit. A hospital wing shuttered its doors under smoke. Emergency lines flooded with voices muffled by snow and fear. 280,000 households lost heating as substations failed. The temperature near zero and dropping amid the sirens and rescue, something else crawled at the edge of the picture. A low pulse on northern bearings, thin and patient. A whisper on the frequency that made technicians frown. It did not look like a missile. It did not behave like a drone. It was a signature smudged with silence, a drift of energy along the tree line that blurred every tracking solution it met. Command rooms stared at the feed and counted heartbeats while officials exchanged measured words. Kiev did not answer with words, it answered with planning. From a bunker beneath the city, a single order moved outward like a current. Not a shout, but a quiet resolve. Prepare, Operation Spiral Catalyst losses were tallied. Roughly $430 million. Infrastructure and lives weighed on cold maps. And while firefighters fought melting snow to pull survivors from frozen streets, the northern horizon carried a different intent, a shape ready to turn routine into rupture. If you had watched that feed, would you have sounded the alarm faster, or trusted the rhythm of the night until the walls began to shake? 5:18 a.m., Kiev. The air in the command bunker was still thick with dust and grief when the screens flickered back to life. Footage rolled in, scorched rooftops, emergency convoys carving through frozen avenues, neighborhoods breathing steam into a wounded dawn, engineers, generals, intelligence officers, each one silent, each face lit by the glow of loss and calculation. A single voice cut through. Initiate spiral catalyst. 2 aircraft. Not a fleet. Not a show of metal or roar of numbers, but precision sharpened over 19 months of quiet rebuilding. Modified MiG-29 units, call signs Wraith-One and Wraith-Two, stripped to the bone and rebuilt with low signature coatings, infrared dampeners, and flight logic trained on grain fields, snow gullies, and river shadows. Cost, barely $12 million combined, less than a pair of modern interceptor launches. Across the room, analysts updated casualty and damage projections. 432 million in structural loss, over 9,000 families displaced, 12 key substations offline. And yet, no panic in the room, only purpose. At a covert strip outside Venezia, mechanics tightened the final fasteners, sealed stealth plates with frost-proof compounds, and marked each fuselage with a spiral emblem, a reminder. Strategy could bend steel and pride alike. Then, mid-briefing, that same anomaly reappeared on Ukrainian tactical screens. A low, crawling echo inside Russian radar lanes. Height under 40 meters. Signature flickering like breath on glass. It wasn't noise. It wasn't weather. It was an opening. Engines ignited, turbines whispering beneath winter fog. Wraith-One and Wraith-Two rolled forward, skis skimming into darkness at Mach 1.8, hugging the ground like moving shadows. Look closely here. Would you place your trust in two aircraft against one of the most layered air shields on Earth? Tell me in the comments, is intelligence the new armor? Because next, those shadows will cross 600 kilometers of protected airspace. And something inside Moscow's defenses will blink first. 3:58 a.m., Moscow control time, a sky of iron silence. Two streaks moved beneath it, not screaming but breathing with the rhythm of terrain. Wraith-One and Wraith-Two skimmed 34 meters above snow-heavy treetops, air so cold it carved frost across their canopies. Below them stretched 2,000 square miles of Russia's winter farmland, every field pale, every road asleep, every farmhouse unaware that shadows were passing faster than thought. Above, the world watched. 238 radar stations swept their cones in patient circles. Krasuka 4M arrays scanned for heat signatures. Early warning satellites mapped thermal flicker across the border arc. A defense network valued at more than $9 billion traced the horizon, waiting for something loud, predictable, ideal for intercept. It did not see what mattered. At the Belarus woodline, a decoy drone, the L-130, broke pattern, rising just enough to mimic a departing fighter. Russian tracking nodes blinked, confused, then locked. Two interceptor missiles launched, each worth more than a patrol vehicle fleet. They climbed, burned, and detonated against nothing but empty winter air. Reload timers began counting down. 55 minutes to readiness. In the same breath, Wraith-Two flipped from silent flight to strike posture. ACOT 31P darted off its rail with a brief flash. No roar, just velocity. It punched toward a jamming relay at Bryansk's perimeter, striking hard enough to force systems offline and erase nearly 18% of regional radar coverage. Control officers in Moscow murmured across encrypted channels, screens blinking with ghost artifacts, false formations, phantom echoes, tracks multiplying in places no aircraft existed. One operator marked 11 contacts before the feed snapped clean, as if the sky itself had shut its eyes. By 4:05 a.m., the air above Bryansk lay hollow and blind. Two aircraft, $800 million of defense neutralized. And the horizon ahead glowing faintly with the first lights of Moscow. 4:09 a.m. The frozen crown of Russia lay beneath a sheet of low cloud. Wraith-One and Wraith-Two broke through the final veil of haze, climbing from tree-hugging stealth to 10,000 meters in a single breath. Below, the Moscow ring glimmered under winter streetlights. 12 million hearts sheltering in the illusion that steel walls and early warning grids could lock out consequence. Inside the cockpit, altimeters steadied. Target corridors cleared. A coded pulse from Kiev slid across encrypted channels. Precise, steady, cold. Execute spiral pattern. Weapons free. 3 R-77M strike packages detached first. Not meant to level districts, but to send force into the heart of privilege and command. They fell at Mach 3.1, carving silent geometry through the dark. Impact flared along Kutuzovsky Prospect. Towers of steel and mirrored glass, home to security elites and energy magnates, shattered into fountains of sparks and fractured polymer. Nearly 3,000 windows ruptured in the shockwave bloom, shards drifting through air like frozen confetti. Fire suppression systems surged, but heat climbed past 950 degrees Celsius, melting aluminum trim like wax beneath a torch. 2 seconds later, Wraith-Two swept lower, slipping through columns of rising smoke. Its KH-31PS streaked toward nodes that powered authority. a government logistics hub, a data backbone feeding encrypted ministries, and a metropolitan power switch yard on the city's western spine. A crater of white steam erupted as transformers ruptured, a pulse that silenced comms towers across 2 boroughs. Bus lines stalled, door alarms bricked. A portion of the western grid dipped into blackout for 17 minutes, plunging nearly 1.9 million residents into sudden winter dark. Above the city, contrails faded. Below, emergency sirens echoed through empty avenues dusted in snow and embers. Moscow had been designed to endure armies, columns, armor, thunder. Instead, it had met calculation, delivered by silence and altitude. And as smoke climbed the facades of buildings once thought untouchable, the sky kept its secret. 2 shadows were already turning toward their next strike line. 6:40 a.m. Moscow dawn crawled over a skyline bent in places it never expected to bend. Smoke curled from rooftops. Plumes rose from transformer yards, still shedding heat into frozen air. The city that branded itself invulnerable now sounded like any other metropolis struck without warning. Sirens layered over distant generators, voices echoing between concrete and frost. More than 16 fires burned across 3 administrative districts. Metro lines slowed to a crawl as signaling nodes attempted manual resets. The primary emergency dispatch grid, strained by overlapping calls, experienced cascading delays. 17 minutes where coordination fractured into static and repetition. Central Command issued preliminary figures: 14 dead, 93 injured. Damage concentrated in high-security residential sectors and secondary government support sites. But independent analysts watching from abroad marked discrepancies. Satellite imagery showed roof deformation across energy substations well beyond initial reports. At least 8 armored convoy depots registering thermal spikes from secondary fires. Traffic logs from 3 secure motorcades scrambled mid-route, redirected under emergency protocols not seen in years. Civilian flight paths shifted erratically as ground control cycled to backup nodes. 2 commercial airliners, lacking immediate clearance guidance, orbited into holding patterns above Domodedovo airspace until military channels stabilized. Emergency fuel reserves engaged. In communication bunkers beneath the capital, senior officials gathered in muted corridors. Reports flowed like frost-thickened water, slow, deliberate, edged with disbelief. Moscow's perimeter surveillance net, long considered a digital fortress, had gone partially dark for nearly an hour. 9 billion in layered defense had bent under less than 4 million in stealth, misdirection, and timing. Intelligence officers traced the incursion vector. Low, disciplined, nearly algorithmic in its path. By 8:10 a.m., municipal networks came back online in staggered sweeps. Relief flickered through control rooms, then caution returned. The power grid hummed unevenly. Commuter rail resumed under emergency routing. Armored units rolled from depots to perimeter positions as if expecting a second wave. No broadcasts of triumph sounded. No speeches declared stability. Moscow was awake, but not reassured. Something had slipped through its armor, and the morning light did not erase it. Night returned, not as silence, but as reckoning. Across Ukraine's northern provinces, generators pulsed, rescue crews cut through frozen debris, and families lit candles where the power grid groaned under emergency load. $430+ million in damage, thousands displaced, critical substations limping back online, the cost of enduring the first blow. Yet beneath it, a quieter truth settled. Survival had become strategy. Strategy had become certainty. At a covert airstrip near Vinnytsia, 2 MiG-29 Wraith units rolled to a stop, frost mottled across their fuselages, traces of burned polymer still clinging to intake seams. No cheers, no flash photography. Engineers moved in silence, gloves brushing metal that had carved through $9 billion in air defense layers. Mission logs confirmed the impossible. Ukraine had spent just under $3.8 million to inflict more than $600 million in direct military and infrastructure losses, and secondary impact estimates pushed the figure beyond $1.2 billion. Far from the runway, hotel lobbies and embassies across Europe flickered with breaking news. NATO analysts whispered about micro-strike parity, the idea that a small, intelligent force could now fracture systems once thought invincible. Quiet approvals moved through Baltic air corridors. Allied planners shifted flight permissions like chess pieces. Moscow released brief statements. Restoration underway, systems stabilizing. No mention of how the breach happened. No admission that a pair of jets had rewritten its assumptions. And so, on that winter night, power was measured not in noise or mass, but in precision and thought, proving that in the age now unfolding, the sharpest weapon is not volume, but vision. Night settled over two fronts, one scarred by the weight of falling steel, the other shaken by the strike that slipped past certainty. In Ukraine, candles burned in windows where electricity wavered, each flame a quiet answer to the cold. In Moscow, smoke thinned above districts once believed unreachable, alarms fading into a silence that felt heavier than noise. Numbers will be debated. The cost of missiles, the price of precision, the balance between damage and deterrence. But one lesson stood clear across the frost-lit horizon. Power is no longer measured only in armor or engines, but in ideas that refuse to bow and tactics shaped in the space between fear and resolve. Because walls can be built, and sirens can scream, yet innovation can pass through places steel never could. Tell me, after seeing this night unfold, do you believe strategy has overtaken strength? Share your thoughts below.